is recorded, and the recording will be made available via our YouTube channel after the event. Also, every participant will receive a certificate of attendance. Please submit any questions you have in the chat box, and we will answer these at the end of the session. Without further delay, I'm excited to hand over to Jane, who's going to tell us about building learner confidence with PTE General. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Charlie, and hello, everyone. I am Jane Bledsoe, and I am the product manager for PTE General. We'll talk briefly about the fact that PTE General will be Pearson English International Certificate next year. But we have a lot of good things in store for you today with regard to preparing for this test. The test itself is not changing much. We are going to add a computer form of the test next year. But what we're going to talk about today is really about prep products for PTE General. Just to give you a quick little bit of background about myself, I've been with Pearson for about 8 or 9 years now, and I started in the US business with another test called the GED test. Been working in the UK for the past couple of years, and our primary focus has been on PTE General and making a lot of prep products available for you. So I'm excited to share that with you today. So what we're going to do today is find out just how ready are your students for their exams, and what can we give you that allows you to understand a little bit better what's on the test, both for you and for them, and how ready are they to take the exam. So a couple of our new products will help you determine both their familiarity and their readiness to pass the test. So let's go ahead and dig in, and I can tell you much more. We're going to start with some research that we did a couple of years back, where we were able to send out surveys to about 750 test takers who were preparing for a general English exam. Not necessarily just PTE General. There were Cambridge test takers, Oxford test takers, a variety of young people who were planning to take a general English exam. And we asked them about their concerns. So I'm going to share some of those findings with you first. Then we're going to talk about how Pearson gets engaged with learners, with teachers, how we can help with the concerns that test takers and you as teachers may have about their learning and about their preparedness. I'm going to walk you through our new app called Warmup and show you what learners can find there. And then we're going to talk about our brand new product that just launched a couple of weeks ago called the Readiness Test. There's a lot of buzz and a lot of excitement about this right now. I think you're going to enjoy what you see because we have tools there not only for your test takers, but also for you. Then we're going to talk about ways you can try these tools yourself and the ways that they can be purchased. And then finally, what are we learning so far about the students that are using these products and what's coming in 2021? So lots to cover. Let's get underway. So we have a poll here, and I mentioned before that we did some research in 2018, and we asked general English test takers, what worries you the most? What are you most concerned about with regard to taking a general English test? And they answered this question, but I want you to take a turn and use our poll and tell me what you think their top answers were in terms of what worries them the most about general English test taking. So we'll give you a minute to do that. The poll should be coming up. Charlie, do we have a few poll responses that we can go to? I'm not seeing the answers, but I do see the poll itself. Can we go to some answers? Oh, only 15% of you have voted so far. So we'll give you another minute or half a minute.
I'm afraid.
As we wait for those poll answers to arrive here so we can discuss them a little bit, I think what's really interesting is just how many people, I'm interested to see your feedback, but how many people from our test takers are actually really worried about prep, really worried about prep. Charlie, are we seeing answers?
Yeah, I'm sorry, there was a bit of a glitch with it. I had to restart it. We've had some entries now, but perhaps we could move forward.
Sure.
I can show you the results, but I relaunched it, and we're only just back at 20% having answered. Okay.
That's okay. We can look at what.
Luckily, Jane, we do have plenty of time after the session, actually, so you can just carry on going. We haven't got another session to end, so we can allow another minute.
Okay. All
Good
right.
stuff. We're up to about 20% now. So everybody, if you can see the poll on your screen, click the answer and scroll down and click submit. Make sure you click that submit button. It's great to see your answers coming through in the chat box, but if you can submit it through the poll on your screens, that would be all the better. Fantastic. Okay, so we've got about 25% now.
While you're voting, I'll make one more comment here. What we saw in this research was a really big difference between young test takers and older test takers. So younger test takers aren't that worried about prep. They're just worried about their results. Where people in their age 20 and up, I would say, are much more worried about whether or not they've spent enough time preparing. And I think this goes to the fact that those that are younger probably have the benefit of a teacher involved. So they know they're getting direction from you. But some of those older test takers, they really haven't been in the classroom for a while. And they're really wondering if they are genuinely prepared for this test. So we did see a very big difference based on age.
Okay, Jane, so it's just about leveling out. We've got 86 people responded, which is about 35%.
Okay.
But let's share those results, shall we? We've got some pretty clear answers.
Great.
There you go.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So let's see if we can scroll down. Is it possible to scroll down the page a little bit here? Whether I will pass or fail, definitely. A lot of people worry about that. That is a primary concern. The preparation for the test, it looks like 9% thought that was big on the list. Let me see if I can scroll. Oh, yes, I can. Having no concerns, yeah, there was a small percentage that actually had no concerns whatsoever, but there are always those test takers, right, that are supremely confident in their capabilities when maybe they shouldn't be. Its ability to improve my English, yep, there was a small percent of that. And its ability to help me progress in my career, also a small percentage. So this looks very similar to what we saw in the actual results. So now we'll go back to our slides and show you the real results, because it was pretty close to what you all thought as well. So when you look at this slide, you'll see that on the right-hand side of the pie, about 50% of the respondents, these 750 test takers, were most worried about whether they would pass or fail, 33%, and preparation for the test, 17%. And that was, I think, the highest in your survey results as well. There was about 12% that thought, the time taken to prepare was also a big concern. I mentioned the difference between the young and the old. If you want to call a 20-year-old old, I wouldn't, but older than the younger classroom participants. Their concern was about, did I take enough time? Have I prepared enough? And then I had no concerns. There's always a portion of test takers who feel supremely confident. Its ability to improve my English, 7%. Its ability to help me with my career, 5%. I think that's exactly the same thing we just saw in your survey results. And then there was a smattering of other concerns. But all in all, I would say that the biggest concern of our test takers is pass or fail and prep. So that leads us into what we're going to talk about today, which is, how about that prep? What are we doing? What's Pearson doing around test prep? And why are we so very interested in this? Well, there are a couple of things I think Pearson does very well. I have worked for other companies, and so I think I can say this with some confidence. Pearson is very interested in not only gathering insights from our current customers and potential customers, but then we use data to make decisions about products, about what we enhance, about what we build, and we share what we learn. So we have a lot of efficacy studies. And if you've been to our website and seen our efficacy evidence, you might find this really interesting to see how we're measuring outcomes of the products that we produce. So prep is of great interest to us, particularly at this time when there's a whole lot of students and test takers out there who are preparing on their own, and more so because of COVID. And we want to be sure that the products we're producing actually help them achieve their objectives. And we have to study that, and we have to make decisions based on data. And so this is, I think, a real strength of Pearson in understanding the needs of the customer, measuring the outcomes, and sharing them back with you. So let's talk a little bit about test prep specifically for PTE General now. We prepared an app this year for every learner at every level. This app gives real test content, real retired test content that we're not using today, but have used in the past, and allowing students to get out there and use this app at any level, A1 through C2. See what some of the items would be like on our test, and they can access it anytime, anywhere, and it's free, 24/7. I'll give you a couple of ideas of what's included. I mentioned the 6 levels, but we also have all 4 skills represented there. So they will get practice with items on reading, writing, speaking, and listening. They'll get a chance to record themselves on speaking items and then listen to a model answer so they know what it should sound like. They can find out immediately if they are right or wrong on the multiple choice questions. And those are primarily in the reading and the listening sections. And then they get a chance to do some writing prompts. And with those writing prompts can also see their work up against a model answer. So while we can't give immediate feedback on speaking and writing, we think the model answers do a pretty good job of telling them this is what you're shooting for. The other thing I really like about the app is it allows candidates to know what to expect of that speaking test, which can be one of the more nerve-wracking components of the test. They're not sure what they're going to be asked, but what the app allows them to do is to know what's expected of their performance, not the questions themselves, as much as what am I expected to do in this kind of an exercise? And I'll show you a couple examples of that as we move forward in our screenshots here of the app itself. If you want to have a look later on at our YouTube video, it'll also give you a nice quick overview of what the app can help you accomplish. We have the app available in two formats, both Android and iOS, and it's available for you to download anytime you like. I hope you'll go out and check it out. Let's talk first about the listening and reading items that are in the app. So each of the items in listening are listen and select the best answer, listen and fill in the missing words, and listen and type what you hear. Now, listen and type what you hear is what we call a dictation exercise, and it is unique to PTE General. I don't believe any of our competitor tests have it. And this gives them a lot of practice. Actually, there's a separate dictation component in the app that they can just drill on this one in particular. It is a really good way to get them to listen and then record what they're hearing. And it helps us understand just their ability to really understand that language, comprehend it, and then get it down and recorded correctly. So we're not only measuring in this particular item, not only measuring their listening skills, but their competency with language, their spelling, their vocabulary, even their grammar. So it helps us quite a lot to understand their proficiency with that one item alone. Moving on to reading items, there are some really long passages, particularly at the C2 level. And some might think that that's a little challenging to scroll on a mobile device, but I think that they're getting more and more used to that all the time. And so they're reading a long passage and they're answering a series of questions in the reading items, or selecting a best choice for a missing word or words. So that's the kind of items that they will see in listening and reading skills. And here's some examples of writing and speaking skills that they can try out in the app. On the left, the writing items. So they're given a couple of different options usually in our writing test, where they can write a blog article, they can write an essay, or they can write a letter. All of these forms of communication help them in their future endeavors to present ideas effectively in a meaningful way. So that others understand them. So the essay form is available on some of our test forms, not all. Sometimes they will be asked for an article or a letter instead. When it comes to speaking items then, here's where I mentioned before that they're going to see some prompts and they're going to record themselves speaking. And one of the items in the exam is about speaking about yourself, some personal information. That's the first exercise that they will do. They'll record themselves, and then when they're done, they'll be able to compare that to what we would expect them to do in that exercise. I also think the discussion item that is presented here, record defending your position in a discussion. This is something that is really good to know before you get to the test, that you're going to be expected to take a position on a certain topic and defend it. And so if the examiner is taking the opposing view, you're not to switch to their view. You're supposed to keep your own position on something. And I think that can be, if you don't know about that ahead of time, might be a little challenging. We have a photo description. Record your observations about two photos. What are these photos? What do you see in the photos? Can you compare and contrast them? We're looking for vocabulary. We're looking for emotion in this. We're looking for other applications of that image. Can that image be used in an article? So there's a variety of things that we're looking for. And the beauty of the app is it really gives you tips along the way about what we're looking for in these various exercises. The test takers then, after they've done some of these exercises, can check to see just how well they've done. And you'll get points for those items that you've gotten correct in the reading and the listening items. But then you'll also see how you've done in terms of speaking and writing attempts. Have you done them all? You'll see 100% if you've done them all. But on the right-hand side then, what you'll see is what percentage of the listening and reading skills you got right. So it gives them something to shoot for. Of course, we'd love for them to all be at 100%, but I mean, even I've made some mistakes as I've gone through the app, so it's possible that 100% might be a challenging thing to achieve. They can also find out, though, just how long they've spent on the app. And the other thing that we'll be introducing next year is some gamification around this, some competitions. You might be able to set up in your classroom some competitions for how many get a certain percent right. And then we'll have some more broad-based public sorts of contests going on with this to get more people engaged in using it. So who's using it? Well, it's been out since this summer, but as you know, the summer was challenging for a lot of people. And so we're just starting to see a lot more utilization now that we're delivering tests. We delivered tests in July, October, November. We have a December session coming up. And what we've seen in recent weeks is a real increase in use of the app. So there are a lot of candidates, a lot of students preparing right now for these tests. So we've seen thousands of users around the globe, and they've been primarily in these countries: Argentina, Ecuador, Italy, Mexico, Poland, Russia, Turkey, Ukraine. We see that they are primarily using their time to get familiar with listening items. So I mentioned before about that dictation exercise. I think they're spending a lot of time with that, really getting familiar with listening and then recording what is spoken. And that's a really good exercise to get lots of practice on before the test. Here's links to where you can download the app. And as I mentioned before, in 2021, we're going to be launching a computer-based test. So we will have some computer-based items that we'll be adding to the app, as well as introducing some contests and some other rewards. Okay, I think we are ready for another poll. The question here is, how important is tracking your students' test prep engagement and progress? If you'll choose just one of these answers, please. Is it more important than ever now due to how much practice has to be done outside the classroom? Is it somewhat important because you want to know overall about how many hours people are spending? Is it not that important but nice to know? Or is it not at all important? You just want to know that they're going to be ready for the test. So here's your questions. Let's see what our answers will be. Charlie, how are we coming along there?
Yes, we've just had 25% casting a vote, which amounts for just under 80 people.
Okay. Another 10 seconds.
Yeah, that would sound good. Perhaps while we're waiting, you could address this question from Diane. That are these two apps, are they free for everyone?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And as I mentioned, we have all 6 levels, from CEFR level A1 up to C2 in the app. But there are also 3 practice sets for each of them. So there's lots and lots of questions, lots of opportunity to practice there. So, if you're working with a class of students, you might want to assign practice test 1 or 2 or 3. And then do some competition to see who gets 100% of them done and what their percentages correct are. That might be kind of a fun thing to do. And then they can do practice test 2 on their own. So there's lots of questions there for them to tackle.
Okay, so we're just about leveling off. We've had just under 100 people submit the a response. So would you like to see the answers?
Yes, please. Thank you.
There you go.
How important is tracking? Let's see what we've got. More important than ever. Yes. 24%, 6% somewhat important, 2% not that important, not at all important is 1%. So this is good. This is a good sign that some of the tools that we're preparing for you do actually allow you to track performance. So we're going to then move to our next slides, which tell us a little bit more about how you can do that. So I'd like to present to you the new readiness test. The readiness test is a tool that you can use in the classroom to tell you how ready your candidates are, your students are for taking the test. And it's not just reporting back individual performance, but there's an opportunity to see group performance as well. And the teachers who have used this have really, really liked it. So I'm going to walk you through this today. This is, as I said, kind of a prediction of an outcome, but it also gives you some really meaningful information about what the candidates and your classroom could be doing in the meantime to get more ready for the test. It takes about an hour. It is a test that can be delivered from home. Anyone can take it anywhere, pretty much. And again, it gives you individual suggestions on what to do next and group recommendations as well. So let's have a look at what's in it. So this is preparing a candidate for a certificated test, which some might call a high stakes test. We know that a lot of candidates are using it to get into university or perhaps jobs locally. And we know that most candidates are actually taking it at the B2 and C1 level. So we have prepared 4 different versions of this readiness test, starting at A2 and going to C1. It is about an hour, as I mentioned, but they can take it anywhere. It is an internet-based test. So they can take it from home, or if you prefer that you have your students in the classroom when they take it, then you know exactly when it'll be finished and you can see a group report right away. So that might be another way that you make this available to your students. They will need a computer, they will need a headset, and they do need internet. So all of those have to be in place for them to effectively take this test. We have a way for them to enter into the test hub, a new form of access for getting to this test, and then for you to actually see their scores and for the student themselves to track their progress. We use AI technology to mark this test, so the results are almost immediate, or certainly within 30 minutes of taking the exam, they will have a result back. And what they'll find out in their results is if they are ready to take that certificated exam, they're taking PTE General, whether they're potentially ready or they're not ready. And they also get that kind of reading per skill, not only as an overall, but also how ready are they in the listening section, the speaking section, the reading section, and the writing section. And then finally, we do some mapping to courseware, which I'm going to show you here in a minute. The first real exam that predicts your outcomes, this is a reason why you want to use this test probably going forward. We haven't had a predictive type test like this before. And so we're very excited about its potential in terms of helping you, from an efficacy standpoint, present only those candidates who are really ready to test. And with the green, amber, and red traffic light indicator, you get a really quick look at a test result. And all you have to do is, look at it quickly and you know their outcome without having to assess a lot of data. It does assess them overall readiness to pass, but then, as I mentioned, at each of the 4 language skill levels as well. And the performance report that I'll show you in a minute here also gives them feedback on what to do next, what to do to get better in each of those areas, including pointing them to any courseware you might be using in your class. We think this is a good way to go because it's fairly objective. It's not as if you're relying on others to make this determination for you. It is artificial intelligence scoring these tests. So there's really, no bias there. It's all just being done by computer. And the questions are really focused on giving us a quick read of the capability, and we do that with a pretty short test because we have integrated skill items that are at the same time testing an ability to listen and write, to read and speak. And so, because many of the items are integrated, you don't need as long of a test. So, it doesn't take a lot of time to get a pretty accurate result. So, from the test time, from the time they finish this test to the time they get their results, is something like less than 30 minutes. And you could, as I mentioned before, use this from home, but you might want to use it in your classroom. And it has a very simple administration, and results analysis is super easy. There's nothing that you have to do. It all comes your way very quickly. As I mentioned before, the most important thing to know about this test is that you need to have a computer, you need to have internet access, and you need to have headphones. And beyond that, the rest is pretty straightforward. When they get into the test, they're going to get some guidance about what they're going to see in the test ahead of time. So reading is going to come first, then speaking and listening, and then writing. So they'll see that. They'll have an equipment check. So they'll be sure that they can be heard on their, they can hear everything on their headphones, but then they can also be heard as they're speaking. So there's a little speaking test that comes along with that. And then here's a couple examples of the types of items that they'll see. So in the reading section, there is a bit where you are asked to choose a picture. There's also a bit where you're asked to choose a missing word. And when you move on then into the listening and speaking section, we're doing some timing on this test. The test is timed, so they only have a given amount of time per section. And that actually helps them prepare really well for the exam itself, which is also a timed test. And you'll see that more specifically in the computer-based test, that each section will be timed. So we're kind of preparing them to get used to that, the fact that there is timing associated with this. And they'll be able to chart their progress too. So in the little box that's circled, they'll not only see how much time has passed, but they'll see how far they are in terms of the number of questions they've answered. So we think that will be really helpful to them as they start preparing for the exam, particularly if they're taking the computer-based exam next year. In addition, we've got a couple other items here that allows you to listen or read and then record, or look at a picture and record what you see there. These are writing examples, reading a passage, and then after 30 seconds, that passage disappears and the candidate types in what they remember. This is really good practice at understanding the gist of some reading, not having to memorize anything. We're not after memorization here. We're really wanting students to read something for meaning and then be able to replicate the meaning of what they read in this box. And then on the right-hand side, you'll see a writing exercise about a picture. Now, the really nice thing about computer-based testing and the readiness test itself is that it does a word count for the candidates as they move forward. And that's a tricky thing to do in a written test where you're handwriting something. How do you get all those words counted? So we think that this is going to be really handy to them. They will not have to count their own words. The computer will count it for them. And when they're done, they'll see this end of test screen, and they will find out that, in about 30 minutes, they can come back to their dashboard at the test hub and find their scores. So let's dig into the reports a little bit. This first copy here that we're looking at is for the individual, for the candidate themselves. This is the kind of report that they get back after that 30 minutes of waiting. They will see that their report reflects their name, their test date, and if you assigned this test to them, then they'll see the name of their school at the top of the report. Then we'll indicate to them what CEFR level they either are ready for, or potentially ready for, or not ready for. And so, as I mentioned, there are 4 examples, 4 different versions of the readiness test at A2, B1, B2, and C1. This particular example is of a candidate who took a B1 test and they got a potentially ready. Well, what does potentially ready mean? Well, when you look at their skill scores, you can see that they're potentially ready in listening and reading, but they're speaking, they're really not ready. They have more practice to do there. And with writing, they seem to be very ready. So, I mean, that gives you an indication immediately of where to focus your energy with this particular student. The other great thing about this report is that you can choose from some different courses that we have available and mapped to the PTE General test to help them prepare. So if you're using Gold Experience or you're using Business Partner or Speak Out or Wider World, those are correlated within the score report so that it tells you more about what you can do in those books, what pages to use, what exercises they should use in order to get better and be more ready for the exam. The second page of the report then goes into much more detail at the skill level and tells them, here's what you can do. Here's your performance summary on your listening skills. And here's some recommended activities to get better, to get to that B1 level that you're after. Similarly, for reading, for writing, and speaking, we give them that kind of detailed feedback and specific exercises to use. Now, here's what I think teachers will be very excited to see, is that this same individual report is then aggregated up into a group readiness report. So you can see the results of your entire class at one look at a report. In this example here, we have a variety of test takers who have taken the B1 level. And a certain percentage, the largest percentage, luckily for this teacher, are ready. They're ready to take the B1 test. And that's a really, really good news. But there's another 20-some% that are potentially ready and probably need a little bit of work before they're ready to sit the exam. And finally, a smaller percentage who are simply not ready and probably have a lot more to do than the potentially ready students. As you move through the report, then you'll see individually by test taker name how they each individually performed. So now you know where to focus your energy, and you're going to look for those ambers and those reds and say, where do I need to spend a little more time in class working with these students? The performance summary level then tells you what the class can do at an average number of your students, then what they can do in listening, what they can do in writing, in speaking, in reading, and where you can focus your energy on recommended activities. So it gives you your lesson plan, so to speak, for your whole group of students. So we've given the readiness test in a field test format, but now we actually have a lot of learners taking the test themselves, and we have asked for some feedback. How do they feel about the test? And how do their teachers feel about it? And we've got some really good feedback so far. Overall, they're responding really positively to the readiness test. As students, 78% would recommend this test to their friends. We think that's a pretty good Net Promoter Score. How would they like to take this test again in the future? 81% agreed or strongly agreed with that statement. We also had a really large cross-section of age here. I mentioned before, PTE General is appropriate for teenagers and adults, but look at the large percentages of younger and older people we had taking this exam. And then we know that we've probably hit on something pretty good if it is this positive amongst 21 and older, as well as 14 years and younger. So 36% of the people who took the test in the field test were 17 to 18 years old. And that is, a really big population for us on PTE General. But there was also a significant population, 21 or older, 31%. And these are the people who are primarily taking this test, then to go on and get jobs in their own country. 21% are probably taking it because a teacher told them to, 15 or 16 years old, and 9% at 14 years or less. And then I mentioned before, primarily our test takers are taking this at the B1, B2, and C1 levels. So you can see that 70% of our field test participants were also at those levels. So again, we're feeling pretty good about our cross-section of students who have taken the test so far and their positive reaction to it. There are a variety of ways in which you also could take this test and see what you think. So if you want a free readiness test for yourselves as teachers, I am happy to make sure that you get one. Just send me an email. My email address is in the slides, and we would be really happy to have you take the exam yourself. It will give you familiarity with the process and also allow you to share that with students in terms of here's what they can expect from it. It allows you to see a report and how you can leverage that in the classroom. So again, we really want to encourage your use of it. There are discounts available on the test. The test does have a monetary value, and that's determined by your local market. But in Practice Test Plus, the new books we just created this year, there is a 40% off the retail price for any candidates who have Practice Test Plus, and they can actually buy that then for themselves if they like. And then finally, the students will be able to buy this readiness test themselves by January 1st. We're just finishing up some of the work on the e-commerce platform now, so that we hope by early next year, students will be able to go in and purchase for themselves. So what are we learning? Well, we've learned a lot in the last several months about the test prep that we have out there. And as I said before, we're committed to sharing what we learn with you so that we can all improve. But Android devices are really being used most on the app instead of iOS devices for general English test prep. In fact, at a 10-to-1 ratio. So we know Android devices are a good place for us to develop future test prep. The daily usage that we have seen just since our test sessions started up again in October is amazing. So our daily usage has doubled and tripled 1 week prior to test taking. So we know that the app is getting a lot of use right before test time. Most app users are focusing, as I mentioned, on the listening section and some writing skills. This surprised me a bit because I thought that speaking is one of those things that candidates would want much more practice with. But they're really focusing in on listening and the writing skills. Maybe the listening because we know that our dictation section might be a bit different from some other exams they've taken. We're finding that on average, candidates are spending about 15 minutes per practice session. So we think that's a good amount of content to give them at a time. And they can get through a practice test, at least a couple sections of a practice test in the app in that amount of time. And then finally, the fact that there's many readiness test takers right now looking forward to practicing online in the future, that tells us that we have more prep to create in an online internet-based format for them. Finally, what's coming in 2021? So we are going to build more content for prep. One thing being a computer-based question bank. So I mentioned before, we're going to be launching a computer-based test next year. And before the computer-based test launches, we want to have a question bank available to candidates, but also to teachers, so that they have plenty of practice with the computer-based items. Now, the readiness test really does give them, the opportunity to see what computer-based items are like and are going to be like in the computer-based test. But it's short, And you kind of get one try and then you're done. So what the computer-based question bank gives them is a whole lot more questions, a whole lot more practice, and they can do it on their own schedule. So that's going to be really handy, we think. We're also going to be working on our efficacy studies to understand what impact does using the app before a test have, and what impact does taking the readiness test have on their outcomes on the exam. And as we have that data available, we will be publishing and sharing that with you. We're also interested in whether or not the readiness test can be used with competitive products. I think that could be really interesting. If there's candidates out there taking Cambridge, we would like to know if the readiness test can also predict their outcomes on the Cambridge test. Finally, as I mentioned, the launch of the International Certificate Computer-Based Test will be next year. One exciting component we'll have with the launch of that test is the ability to do remote monitoring, so that if there are candidates who can't come to the classroom due to COVID or other reasons, they will be able to take that test from home with some remote proctoring and making it a secure test no matter where they are. And finally, we will have some teacher training modules coming up on the computer-based test. We'll be starting those probably around March of next year, getting ready for late Q2, early Q3 launch of the computer-based test next year. And I believe that concludes all of my content for today, but I certainly want to answer any questions that have come in.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jane, for that enriching session. It was great to hear all about the readiness and warm-up apps. We've had lots of people asking, how can you get hold of the app? Do you have to pay for it? Is it free? The answer is yes, it is free. And you can download it via an app store, and you can find the links for these on the Pearson website. So at the top of the chat box now, I've pinned the catalog page for all of our assessment offerings. Scroll down halfway down that page and you'll find the readiness and the warm-up apps listed. Go onto their pages where you will find download links for iOS or for Android phones. So please, guys, if you want to have a go at it, it is free and you can download it using that catalog link pinned at the top of the chat box now. So, Jane, we have had a few very small questions in. I'm sure you can provide some snappy answers here. Are these apps only intended for candidates of a PTE exam?
Yeah, so it is. It's a really good question. And yes, the app itself, the free app that's on Android devices and on Apple devices now, that is really meant to prepare for PTE General, because it is the specific questions, the kinds of questions and the tips that they need in order to do a good job on PTE General specifically. So I would say the app is really, really geared to our PTE General test takers. Now, the readiness test itself is, it's really doing a good job of predicting outcomes on PTE General, but we think it may have applicability with other products. So we are looking to do some studies with some schools that are, delivering Cambridge tests, because we would like to see if this predictive test could also predict their outcomes on Cambridge exams and others. So more to come on that. Right now, we can't guarantee that it predicts their outcomes. We can guarantee that it'll predict your outcomes on PTE General.
Fantastic, thank you. We've had, they've just disappeared, the questions I made a note of. Sorry, 1 minute, wait a minute, where are they gone? Here we go. Sorry, Jane. So, how do instructors access the app for one class? Is it designed for instructors to monitor a class?
Today it is not, but it is something we're looking at for next year, to build a dashboard where you as teachers could track how much time candidates are spending. Now, you could just ask them to bring their phones with them to class and show you, here's my time that I spent on this, because it shows that to them in their dashboard on the app. So they could show you themselves. But if you're not together, you're not in the classroom together, how are they going to report that to you? I guess that would still be an off-system kind of a way at this point. Next year, we hope to have a dashboard where you can track that progress.
Great. And here's one that I want to know the answer to. Is it only supposed to be used once?
Which, the readiness test?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, we've talked to teachers, and there's been a couple of different bits of feedback we've gotten on that. Some teachers would like to give the readiness test before the course starts, do some learning, give several hours of instruction, and then take the readiness test again to see if it's changed their readiness level. We will have 2 versions of the readiness test next year. But that's as much as you want to give a candidate. If you give it to them more than twice, they're going to see the same questions again, and then it stops being predictive. So yeah, we don't have a lot of versions of this just yet, and we'll build them over time. But the readiness test was really meant as a predictor of what you're going to do within the next couple of months before you take the test. So from a timeline standpoint, you don't want to administer the readiness test more than 3 months in advance of the exam if you want it to be predictive. And so that's another really important thing, is we don't want too much time to go by between the two, unless they have a long way to go. And then that you've got the months to actually do that kind of preparation.
Thank you, Jane. So I guess we haven't had any more questions come in, and we are at time. But I guess everyone is warmed up and ready to succeed with the PTE General. So Jane, thank you so much for putting those slides together and for the time delivering the session.
My pleasure. Thank you. Thanks everyone for taking the time out of your day to do this.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can only repeat that. Thank you to all of you for joining us today. And thank you as well as the last session in this web series. Thank you to those who have been there throughout all the sessions in the 6 days. It's been great to host you. If you want to catch up with any of the sessions that you may have missed, just search for the Pearson English page within YouTube. The sessions are being uploaded there. Certificates will be sent to you all, and the recordings uploaded. And look out for the virtual goodie bag in the follow-up email that will come after this session. Thank you for joining us in this web series, and we will see you at the next. Have a good rest of your day all, and stay safe. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye now.